Jaya Vandana Gurudev Shri Aurobindo Jaya Jayakar Ho Jaya Vandana Gurudev Shri Aurobindo Jaya Jayakar Ho Jaya Vandana.
Hello, darlings. At first, I would like us to chant Omkar, to chant it together. This way we'll greet each other. Usually, before chanting Omkar, I refer to the tradition according to which we chant it. In our tradition, we chant Omkar neither mysteriously nor sadly, but joyfully. The world is not a God's mistake. It's like a flower that is just beginning to blossom. It's God's joy and His child. Let's join together with this joy and chant Omkar for 3 times. Thank you. Well, those who've come to this satsang, you'll need to work on yourself a little bit. You'll need patience, wisdom, and perhaps some humor, because all sinister forces, if they exist at all, get dissolved, not because of eagerness or some aggression. They dissolve when man smiles, when he laughs, even what attacks him, even that what binds him. Today we gathered together to talk about Holy Scripture, Bhagavad Gita, and I'd like to give comments on Bhagavad Gita, though according to Advaita tradition it's not the same as Vaishnava transmission line of Bhagavad Gita, but I think we'll be able to unite these 2 points of view, because it's better to strive for oneness than to yet another division. And if you have already got to know me, I'd like to get to know the audience. Are there people who have read Bhagavad Gita? Please raise your hands. Okay. Those who haven't read it, I recommend that you read and acquaint with it. It's quite a serious text, which in Indian tradition is considered as the gospel for Christians. There are many diverse exegeses on it, many different points of view, some of which are diametrically opposite, down to some spiritual wars. However, I'll say again that we're trying to unite. I'd like to begin my speech with a few lines by Saraha, one of the founders of Tantra. Some time ago, he sang a song, and these were his words. Despite there is a glaring light in the house, the blind are in darkness. despite the holy spontaneous wisdom, is present among us. Fools still do wrong actions and reside in obscuration. What do we need the Holy Scriptures for? Every life we lose our memory. If anyone has seen films about people that lose their memories, they wake up in the morning and remember nothing. Then a similar thing happens to each of us. When we're born, we don't remember anything, and the most wise of us make notes for themselves to read in the morning about who they really are. I'm this or I'm that. Some say I'm Sergei or I'm Dmitri, and those who puzzled out more write, I'm Atma, and I mustn't forget this. On this stage there are many different teachers. The teachers come, give speeches, give satsangs, and sometimes their opinions even vary. I wouldn't like to argue with anyone here, but I'd like to refer to the Holy Scripture, the one that has been transmitted for millennia, and also to speak resting on my own experience, supported by Sri Bhagavan Krishna, one of the greatest avatars, having had shown the body of light. Usually, people begin to read Bhagavad Gita right from the second or third chapter. It's because the first chapter is very complex. It consists of various names, and what's very important, each name is a destiny. The first chapter is usually avoided by all, but the first chapter is very important. Possibly some people just don't understand its importance. And do you know what this chapter is about? It's about you. It's about you because it has a backstory, a mystical prehistory, in which symbolically it's set about each being's life who is taking a spiritual path. I'll tell you about this prehistory so you can understand. 5 brothers, very good beings, kind and strong, princes, were deprived of their kingdom by deceit. And even when by deceitful agreement they were supposed to get back the right for the kingdom, an evil king, curiously he was called Duryodhana, very assonant with the Russian word. So the evil king Duryodhana refuses to return the kingdom. Good and evil powers meet at the Kurukshetra battlefield to fight. Some are in favor of not giving back the kingdom that they seized, the others to fight back their genuine right. And if some of you are inclined to this symbolic vision, you'll see that this is the battle between good and evil. All the difficulty is confined in the fact that the evil is not altogether evil, whereas the good has also committed a few wrong and foolish acts. If you're familiar with the famous yin-yang symbol, there is a little bit of black in the white and a little bit of white in the black. It's all very similar to our life. It's about kind powers that conducted wrong behaviors. And what is the kindness of the evil side? That there are many respectable people. They're bound with their pledges. Someone just promised to fight for the evil king. One of the main characters, Arjuna, who is on the good side, sees his relatives and even friends on the other side, and even his spiritual teacher. Since the spiritual teacher is liberated, he plays a game. But by his pledge, he has to protect his another disciple, Duryodhana. Even though he's a spiritual teacher, he's aware that he's on the wrong side. Drona is a spiritual teacher, it's his name, and he understands he's on the wrong side. The only joy is that on the opposite side, on the side of light, there are 5 brothers headed by Arjuna, a righteous prince, and Lord Sri Krishna. And he knows, the spiritual teacher, that he will have to die because everyone who is against Lord Sri Krishna will just die, that they can't exist. And he's happy that this is his last incarnation. But Arjuna doesn't have this spiritual vision. I'll repeat again, he's one of the main characters. And his mind seems to be whirling. He doesn't know what to do. There are also good people. He doesn't want to fight. Moreover, his granddad, Bhishma, one of the immortals, is also in the other side. And Bhishma hasn't ever lost his battles, meaning that he's a wise commander. The army of dark powers is literally countless. This is how it's described in Bhagavad Gita. Now I'll tell you why I'm drawing your attention on that, on this more epochal part. Arjuna managed to summon only a small army. It's a direct allegory with our lives. You know what army is against us? It's Maya, illusion. The aim of human life is development and evolution. We're already wise, but we need to get back the kingdom that rightly belongs to us. All the power of God, immortality, knowledge and love. And if we look at the world, we'll see that it's seized by contrary powers. What do you see every time? Immortals that fought it back? Maybe someone in this room is flying in the lotus pose, teleporting or shining. All that power that stands behind the dark side says, you cannot win. You will not win. When you come home, perhaps someone thinks you're crazy, your relatives, and say, what? You're insane? You've started doing yoga, spiritual path? And you think, how? The dearest one is on the other side. Really, you are on that field, and you are the king that has to fight. That is the meaning of the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. By the way, it's part of Mahabharata, the great epos. We're going to read the first few shlokas where Arjuna is telling about that difficulty. Then saw Partha, standing upon opposite sides, uncles, grandsires, teachers, mothers, brothers, cousins, sons and grandsons, comrades, fathers-in-law, benefactors. Seeing these, my own people, O Krishna, arrayed for battle, my limbs collapse, and my mouth is parched. My body shakes and my hair stands on end. Gandiva slips from my hand, and all my skin seems to be burning. I am not able to stand, and my mind seems to be whirling. Also I see evil omens, O Keshava. Well, it should be noted that Arjuna was considered one of the strongest warriors. But when he came to the battlefield, he realized that he doesn't want to fight. Sometimes it happens this way. When you appear on the stage, or you need to do something important, it vibrates a little bit inside. And now imagine that you don't need to give a report, you need to kill all people here. And on the other side are your relatives, dear people, all who you love very much. And Arjuna doesn't feel aggression regarding this. He just wants to run away. But really, the Gita is constructed the way that it considers the main question. Do we need to commit actions in this world? I've already said that you need to make some spiritual effort now to consider and to understand this. It's a very important issue. Do we need to take actions in this world? Or it's enough just to sit, smile and leave saying, "Let this all burn in fire, I've got nothing to do with it"? He asks Krishna to give him guidance, because Krishna insists that he has to protect, that this is his plain duty, to protect his citizens from evil kings, from vicious beings. It is poorness of spirit that has smitten away from me my true nature. My whole consciousness is bewildered in its view of right and wrong. I ask thee, which may be the better, that tell me decisively, I take refuge as a disciple with thee, enlighten me. It should be noted that Arjuna and Krishna were just friends. That is, well, Arjuna has always guessed that Krishna was an unusual being, but you can walk along the street and Krishna may pass by, and you won't just see. That's why we often don't notice those who really can instruct you. Despite this story happened about 5,000 years ago, everything was happening the same way. There were gurus, but Krishna was just the king of Dwaraka, the ruler of the strongest kingdom. He lived very well, smiled, and only wise men saw that he was God's avatar, that he has spiritual knowledge. And he, Arjuna, kind of overcomes himself and at a hard time asks for Krishna's guidance, now as a guru. This is also very important because today we need not only to become familiar with this text. Yes, we'll have a second part when you'll be able to ask your questions and we'll talk in an easier style. But when we're strained by life, when it gets very hard, then we say, "Please, someone, give just any advice." And it had be better by a spiritual teacher. We heard in a shloka before that Arjuna sees evil omens in everything. The same with us. We may even know such people that say, "Oh, this is an evil omen. That's it. Karma has started to deepen, something bad is beginning to happen." Just in such cases, it is desirable to seek assistance in a spiritual teacher. This is an important decision in one's life, and one needs quite a lot of energy. Few are able to do this. Sri Bhagavan said, "It is not true that at any time I was not, nor thou, nor these kings of men, nor is it true that any of us shall ever cease to be hereafter. That which really is cannot go out of existence, just as that which is not existent cannot come into being. The end of this opposition of is and is not has been perceived by the seers of essential truths." And Krishna mercifully gives him homilies. Firstly, he tells him, "Don't worry, my dear, in reality all these kings are immortal. And I'd like that after leaving this seminar, you'll not only understand something mentally, but that you begin to possess some spiritual vision, and that it will start to develop in you. Try to feel that everyone in this room is immortal. We meet not for the first time. We're going along the spiritual path. And I recommend that all your following considerations will begin with that message and that point. All beings around are immortal. Thou hast a right to action, but only to action, never to its fruits. Let not the fruits of thy works be thy motive, neither let there be in thee any attachment to inactivity. Well, as it was said in this satsang, I'd like to talk about the principle of perfection. We'll discuss also the religion of gods, the religion of demons, how gods and demons see the world, so you can feel it. Maybe you are apt to one or another vision. You can free yourself and come over to the God's side, or vice versa, saying, I like the other side more. So the first thing we'll begin with is the way of perfection. There are many people that commit actions and then, feeling sorry, say, I shouldn't have started this at all. I'm a fool, really. It's bad that I started this, bad that I went on, it's bad that I even finished that. And Bhagavan says about the way of perfection that you have the right to act, but the fruit of it doesn't belong to you, because many factors are often mixed up in people's minds. And now Krishna will be solving this tangle. Recently, perhaps some of you were at a satsang when a woman was talking about her true problems. She loves people very much and she doesn't have a ticket to come back home, yeah? You were there? There was such an interesting satsang, and when one of the gurus said, well, wait, we'll buy a ticket, she said, the thing is not about the ticket, but about me committing foolish actions. He says, okay, then let's handle that. When she returns, but what about the ticket in the end? That is when she's told about inner things, she switches to outer things. Then she's told about outer things, she switches to the inner things. Two problems are mixed up in her mind. Well, she had two problems, others have 6 problems, and they think it's a tangle. Therefore, you should have quite a developed mind to be able to handle this all. So, the first thing is to stick with the act of perfection, meaning that you need to understand about correctness of the act. You should be headed towards your divine nature, and it's not important whether you succeed or not. You commit actions, and even if you're unsuccessful, you should say within your heart, I wanted this myself, it's my own choice. And this is an act of a strong person. We'll read now about renunciation. Krishna also says what distinguishes a realized wise man from an ordinary man, from one who just wants to be strong. Let's read this homily. He whose mind is undisturbed in the midst of sorrows and amid pleasures is free from desire, from whom liking and fear and wrath have passed away, is the sage of settled understanding, who in all things is without affection, though visited by this good or that evil, and neither hates nor rejoices. His intelligence sits firmly founded in wisdom, who draws away the senses from the object of sense. As tortoise draws in his limbs into the shell, his intelligence sits firmly founded in wisdom. I'd like to draw attention on a few Krishna's words that are very important on the yoga way. That is what we're going to do now. We're going to cleanse a little bit those obstacles that you may face on your spiritual way. You can listen to many lecturers, but something is not understood, or the obstacles come back. And now it's an aspect of chitta shuddhi, cleaning your consciousness. Actually, you should meditate on spiritual scriptures. Read them many times so they begin to open. Pay attention, he says that by wise men I consider not just those who dwell in all aspects, listen, but those who despite bad conditions are in a state of balance. It means that a wise man actually may be unwell at all concerning outer aspects, but he is in balance. This state of affairs, in reality, is corrected fairly quickly. It means if he's in balance, karma starts to clean and gets freed. But if you agitate every time by those waves or schedule, everything is bad, I also think everything is bad, There are certain methods. When you're totally unwell, try to give that to the Lord and say, God, it's your will. It's your will. My Guru Sri Aurobindo said the following. He has a collection of aphorisms. He said, if God assigns to me my place in hell, I do not know why I should aspire to heaven. He knows best what is for my welfare. If God draw me towards heaven, then, even if His other hand strive to keep me in hell, yet must I struggle upward. In the Christianity they say that a grass blade will not stir without God's will. If you have love for the Supreme, we'll talk about the nature of the Supreme, then this is not just silence in mind. If you think that you've reached the Supreme by just having silence in mind, this is only the beginning, one half of experiencing God. Very good part. People who experience that silence have joy. That's a very high level. It's very good. However, I'll refer to yet another spiritual teacher, Srila Prabhupada, who said, you think you're God? Well, then can you move the sun? No? Then keep practicing. I mean, you should just know the truth. Spiritual teachers and practitioners are not just people who wear garlands, not just those who are honored in some way, etc. It's the beginning of a long journey. And you also can come to these results and go even further. We should not only possess a completeness of consciousness, but also a completeness of power. This is also that yoga which I advocate following my teacher Sri Aurobindo. We all secretly know it. You remember how we dreamed of gurus that fly and teleport. We thought it should be right that way, and it really should be that way. Try not to let the army of darkness blow out that knowledge that you have in your childish perception. It must be this way. And it's not like when you sit on the other side while we have to work here and you just think, are they ever gonna fly at last? This is also your battle, your history. It's not about something what happened 5,000 years ago. Try to hear this out and try to awaken. You're right here and now on that battlefield, on the field of Kurukshetra. You may leave this room and forget this lecture saying, well, it was an interesting lecture, or it was a dull lecture. Try to feel that. So, a wise man is that jnani who, whatever happens, dwells in balance. At the beginning he may be in balance. He has a horizontal line, like in encephalogram. Yeah, as if the being is not present. There may be an earthquake, a house is getting ruined, someone just hit him, or he got a garland, such a flat line. But in reality, if he goes along the way of energy, this line rises, it goes this way. It means that his consciousness also grows and gets stronger. This is important. Then Sri Krishna gives a great pledge. Listen to him. On this path, no effort is lost, no obstacle prevails, even a little of this dharma delivers from the great fear. Well, he says, all I'll be saying further is the great dharma, and that even little efforts save us from the great fear. Sometime, about 25 years ago, I started practicing, and I've never been sorry about it. The great joy has come to me. And delight that comes every day, every hour, and it never leaves you. Usually people say about the way of delight that when you ask someone about it, well, can you say about the best moments in your life, about the happiest moments? And that person thinks for long, well, there were 2 moments. I wish all of you to be filled with that joy every day. It should spill and spread over your being, that nectar, amrita, to flow and be in you. That is not only some moments, but a real presence in that state. The fixed and resolute intelligence is one and homogeneous. O joy of the Kurus, many branching and multifarious is the intelligence of the irresolute. In him whose mind dwells on the objects of sense, with absorbing interest, attachment to them is formed. From attachment arises desire. From desire, anger comes forth. Anger leads to bewilderment. From bewilderment comes loss of memory, and by that intelligence is destroyed. From destruction of intelligence, he perishes. Sri Krishna speaks about karmic sequence. What happens with ordinary people? Yogis have one-directional mind. It's nurtured by mantras, by contemplation, and also by inner consideration. We had teachers of Neo Advaita here, who say that basically you don't need to do anything, adding that what I give you is the beginning and there is also your home task. You need to establish this at home. That is anyway a form of practice that one has to do. It's the highest form of practice, pure contemplation, but it's also a form of practice with no doubt. Just the concept is whether you call it a practice or not. If there is ego, then anger arises. With desire, there is anger again. I want this, but I don't have it. And if you have a desire anyway, then you'll be angry, in case you don't possess the object. When anger rises, you can trace it, and then see the karmic sequence in other people. If you have anger, the division strengthens. There is I and there is that object, duality. When there is duality, the oneness of the world breaks up. When the oneness of the world breaks up, knowledge, subtle knowledge that everything is one, disappears. Memory gets lost. Spiritual memory. A man starts doing wrong actions, he falls to hell. Even in Bhagavad Hadol, the Tibetan book of the dead, when you die, you can see the Lord Yama. According to the book of the dead, yes, actually, this tradition is available to everyone. You can see this being a Christian or an Advaitist. There, this deity is called Yama, yeah, in the Buddhist tradition. And Yama decides whether you go to the heaven or to hell. Well, from Advaitic point of view, you are Yama yourself. You are yourself this deity. And if you say, "Hello, Lord Yama, what have I deserved actually?" then he determines your destiny. If you have always fostered oneness, that you are just Lord Yama yourself, that is, you don't need to be afraid of anything. It's your brother, yourself. You can transmit right to the pure light. It's one of the consequences of what we're talking about now. So, those of you who are listening to this now, it's sufficient for you just to experience at least a few shlokas deep inside, in your heart, and karma gets cleaned quite seriously. It changes. Sometimes people are so attached to the objects. One of my favorite examples, when a man buys a new car, somebody wants to buy a Mercedes, Jeep or something else, and someone walked by and scratched a line on it with a key. And if you attach to it very much, you feel as if they scratched your heart with this key. That means it's not you have the car, but the car has you in reality. You've bought a new TV set, a kid has scratched something on it, or on the wallpapers. These are all examples of attachments. If you just start loving all living beings, you won't have any affections, and you'll have no pain. Sri Krishna speaks about that. That higher being, which is to all creatures a night, is to the self-mastering sage, his waking, his luminous day of true being, knowledge and power, the life of the dualities, which is to them their waking, is a night to the sage who sees. And he says, I'll tell you about day and night, what is really day and what is really a night. Perhaps you're familiar with such life examples. When two are in love, young people are full of rajas, passion, and after a while they start having quarrels. There is nothing to do and they start arguing. A young man or a girl asks, "Do you love me?" and surely wants to hear "I do," or the opposite. In a while, "No, I got it, that you don't love me." And he says, What are you? I do love you." Well, they definitely need to talk with one another. It's such a vital action, lively movement in our pranamaya kosha, the energetic cover. It certainly needed that. Many people suffer. What to do in the evening? They want something to be happening. Look how TV is broadcasting nowadays. Oh, do you know what happened? A train ran off the rails. Here somebody was killed again. Such severity. And if they just think, it's a fine weather today, all's well, who cares about such news when everything is good? Where, we switch to a channel and there they tell that something has fallen. Basically, the wise begin to get tired of all that and say, really, what do we have to do with this? Why everyone needs to know what got ruined, has fallen, and so on? So, but are you ready to watch the TV if you just find there, in general, everything is good? Therefore, the true understanding of day and night, the yogic understanding of it, is that all the vanity of the world is really a night, and the silence of the inner consciousness is a sheer day. Long ago, my first Buddhist guru gave me a practice of silence of the mind, and in 1.5 years, the first deep mind stoppage occurred, the first samadhi. And the only profound experience that I could express in words was the experience of no thought. This is true life. Right now I'm alive. And the moment you have a veil of thoughts and desires, you enter into manifoldness, as if you are falling asleep. I felt that now I'm going to sleep. Now this silence, that period of silence will stop, and I really wanted to resume it. With time, they started to repeat more and more, widening and deepening. Therefore, don't aspire after manifoldness. Strive for this inner silence. It's the only thing that is really valuable. The Buddha, when he entered the first stage of enlightenment, when he decided to reach that great liberation, he saw all the people just as sleeping ones. It wasn't a problem for him to leave the castle. His father told everyone not to let him leave it because he already knew that he'd leave. His father said, "Do not let him off." But Buddha walked like among sleeping people. They didn't even notice him. He was the only awakened. That's why try to nurture this sheer yogi's day. If one abstains from food, the objects of sense cease to affect, but the affection itself of the sense, the rasa, remains. The rasa also ceases when the Supreme is seen. I promise to tell you about the way of bliss, and Sri Krishna here gives Vedic homilies that are even close to tantric ones. Try to hear this, it's different from Buddhism. Buddhists say, all desires lead to suffering, and it's really true, but Krishna gives another aspect actually. The Vedantic tradition is deeper, and he says, you can go along the way of Leela, game, and our tradition, the tradition of Aurobindo, is the way of Leela. The object of sense cease to affect, but the affection itself of the sense, the rasa, remains. Actually, you don't need to leave the world. You don't need to take full withdrawal from everything. And even vairagya, a sort of hostile attitude towards the world. The secret is in being withdrawn from that car or a TV set. And from that moment on, you can enjoy TV and the car. I refer again to my first Buddhist teacher, who was also closer to Lila than to dissolution, Laya. He used to say, Mikhail, take the keys from your house It was very long time ago, more than 20. Take the keys, and as you come home, and back then, if you remember, we had tape recorders, and the first video tape recorders, which only 1 in 1,000 had. Everyone used to visit them to watch. And the first Russian tape recorders. I also had such a tape recorder, and I was very proud of it. I couldn't wait to come home and turn on some cassette that basically was pretty rare. And he said, come home, insert your keys into the door, and before entering, imagine that your house has burnt down. Would you remain in balance? And if you would, then open the door and enjoy everything you have. That is, if you have burnt your attachment, you can continue enjoying it. Well, if it's burnt down, you would say, Om Tat Sat. It was probably a good, interesting fire. It's a pity that I didn't see it. I missed much. If you cry, then that's all. I have nothing to teach you. You don't have renunciation. So that's a good kind of tantric method. Why I'm telling you this? Arjuna, who wanted to go off to the forest, suffered. He said, maybe I'm just attached to richness, to the kingdom, and that's why I want to fight. He used to say, I need to train renunciation. But Krishna replied, no, it's not obligatory. You must have the knowledge. It's okay if you are in renunciation. You can enjoy everything you want. The next stage, when you enter the perception of God undividedly, when even rasa, the taste, also disappears. If you want to leave the world completely, you can do that too. If lie is closer to you, the dissolution. If lila is close to you, you can enjoy this world as well, being a muni, wise man, jnani. Who abandons all desires and lives and acts free from longing, who has no I or mine, he attains to the great peace, O Patra. This is Brahmi Sthiti, firm standing in the Brahman. Having attained thereto, one is not bewildered. Fixed in that status at his end, one can attain to Nirvana in the Brahman. It's very interesting that actually Krishna speaks, you know about what? He speaks about Nirvana. It's a literal translation. He speaks about Nirvana. Vaishnavis usually translate, with all respect to Srila Prabhupada, they translate it just like, you will enter my immortal kingdom. But Krishna himself, if you love Krishna, if you worship him, you should look at the Sanskrit of that shloka. It's chapter 2, shloka 72. Look, there is a lot where Krishna says, my shrine. Quite often it's said, Nirvana. That's why there is no distinction between Vaishnava tradition and Advaita tradition. In reality, all the time Krishna speaks about the highest Brahman and about the nirvanic stoppage of the mind. Thou seemest to bewilder my intelligence with a confused and mingled speech. Tell me then decisively that one thing by which I may attain to my soul's will. That's Arjuna speaking. He keeps listening and listening. Maybe you also have that feeling. What does this man want to say? But he is me who's telling you. There Bhagavan Sri Krishna himself speaks. And Arjuna also doesn't really understand him. He's come to fight, and it seems as if he understands that this is a spiritual fight. Now the conversation is about some kind of spiritual battle, not a material one anymore. But now Krishna speaks about renunciation, then he says that he needs to fight. And Arjuna is in duality anyway. That is, if you ever didn't understand your spiritual teacher or couldn't quite follow the scriptures, maybe here listening to different teachers, they all say different things. Then this duality, which always arises when true knowledge is taught, gives two poles, manifoldness and oneness, action and withdrawal from action. And Arjuna is also in this obscuration, perhaps like many of you here. He says, I don't know what's needed. Tell me once again certainly, what are you inclining me to? The blessed Lord said, in this world twofold is the self-application of the soul by which it enters into the Brahmic condition, as I before said, or sinless one. That of the Sankhyas by the yoga of knowledge, that of the Yogins by the yoga of works. At that time there already was the division. Sankhya yogis used to walk very pompously and ask, you have to find out who you are. Answer that question. And someone asked, but what should I do? They asked the question. Find out who's asking that question. You're familiar with that such tradition, aren't you? It's Sankhya, and Karma Yoga is a yoga of action. Karma Yoga is not mopping the floors. You need to understand it correctly. Karma Yoga is any action that you commit in favor of your liberation. And there already were arguments between choosing which of the ways is correct, and Bhagavan unites that. He says you can do both. You can reach liberation through analytical consideration and also be liberated by the way of action. He starts doing a synthesis of the paths. Not by abstention from works does a man enjoy actionlessness, nor by mere renunciation does he attain to his perfection, to siddhis, the aim of yoga. But if we come to this following, I've reached everything and now I have nothing to do, then we don't get to the aim of yoga, siddhi, perfection, the completeness of manifestation of Brahman. So you need to do certain practices anyway. It's another matter that you can't do them correctly if you are in the state of duality. That is, first of all, during your practice you reach mukti, liberation, and then gradually siddhis come. Usually gurus who go along the ways of both mukti and siddhi say you can simultaneously do some practices and eventually reach both mukti and siddhi, but obligatory, fundamental and final siddhis can be attained only after securing the state of mukti, liberation, after experiencing oneness. Who controls the organs of action but continues in his mind to remember and dwell upon the object of sense, such a man has bewildered himself with false notion of self-discipline. Even at those times in India some deviations already existed. People used to become sannyasins and say that they were not going to do anything, that they are saints, however, in reality they had attachments in their mind. And Krishna says that the point is not in putting an orange dress or even getting naked, walking as dressed in the world. The point is in liberating your mind. If you're free in your mind, you're free anywhere. If you're not free in your mind, whatever dresses or titles you have, it will be just a deception. Actually, I think that if Lord Sri Krishna came now, he wouldn't perhaps wear any orange dresses. You get it, yeah? He would be wearing jeans. And it's really true. I'm not talking about our Indian guests now. It's just their national dresses. They just wear what's sold over there. But if you are purposefully trying to wear special dresses, meaning that there are certain motives why you do it, then it's really unnecessary. Simple example, I'll try to reason it. You all know about Buddha, about the orange cloaks. It's Buddha's cloak, and if you're not in an orange cloak, and one arm must be necessarily loose, not covered, the other arm slightly covered, and if you're not wearing it correctly, they'll say about you, you're not a Buddhist at all. You know why Buddha had that cloak? It's his hunting dress. He was a king, and when he took off all marks of distinction, all his jewelries, and when he was leaving for the forest, renunciation, he just kept that cloak because it saved him from rain and cold during the night. There is no religious background. It was just a comfortable dress. Since then, all Buddhists specially tailor that cloak for themselves, wear it, and give speeches looking very important. So, we mustn't grade that by appearance. It's absolutely wrong. A sort of manasic, reflexive thinking. He, controlling the senses by the mind, O Arjuna, without attachment, engages with the organs of action in yoga of action. He excels. Those who really practice can be called yogi. They get higher. Those who do inner practice, not just some formal attributes. That is once again testified by Bhagavan. By doing works otherwise than for sacrifice, this world of man is in bondage to works. For sacrifice practice works, O son of Kunti, becoming free from all attachment. It's quite an interesting topic. Now we're gonna talk about 4 types of sacrifices. Really, you'll learn that each of you offers sacrifices, right or wrong. We'll talk about it as well. Though, in Vedic tradition, any action should be a sacrifice. And at that times of Krishna, some sort of decline already began to take place. People got mixed up in their actions. They just started to do works for the sake of the work itself. But in reality, without understanding that they were offering sacrifices anyway. So every time any of you go to work, and that is a sacrifice for the Lord Kubera, the god of richness. I mean, you give him your time, all your life or part of it, and he gives you some money. How we date with girls, we give them flowers, it's a sacrifice. In the ancient times, they sang serenades, bhajanas by the girls' windows. And the girl also offers a sacrifice when she puts her makeup on. Yes, this is for the Lord Kama. Also a sacrifice is offered. She wants to look well. All these things are sacrifices. You must understand that you offer sacrifices to demigods, but really, sacrifices may be offered only to the Supreme. And that Supreme in Advaita is also you. Nonetheless, you should understand that in manifested state, you are only His emanation. That is a very difficult topic, and also a very high topic. And some time back in the past, at the beginning of my spiritual path, I cried for long. It was a little bit Rajasic cry. Why can't I be you totally, totally Almighty God? And the answer was that in the world there is only one God. You can be God, but you'll completely disappear. There'll be Bhagavan. So any of you can completely become God, though he'll disappear from this room and will become all the universe. And there is also a solution. That's an infinite number of avatars. It's you. And you can be creators of universes. You can be almighties, but you'll be different from God. Just a little bit. In all traditions, you will be worshipped as a Lord, like Dattatreya, Sri Krishna, Shiva, Christ. But you'll be just a little bit different. And such hints are even in Christianity. When Jesus is praying, he says, I and the Father are one. He tells his followers, I and the Father are one, but the Father is greater than I. And you know that in the Christian tradition, Trinity, they are all one. We worship the Christ as God, but he is a little bit, just a little bit different. If he wasn't a little bit different, he will just not be manifested. Krishna is also considered as the Supreme Lord, but he also has attributes. If there is a flute, we say, oh, it's Krishna. If there is a trident instead of flute, we say, who? It's Shiva. There are already phenomenal differences. All the differences, both the trident and the flute, are in the Supreme Bhagavan. The first emanations were the emanations that created the main universal religions. Their power is unlimited. They are separated only in order to be somehow distinguished and to exist in this space. He should not create a division of their understanding in the ignorant who are attached to their works. He should set them to all actions, doing them himself with knowledge and in yoga. So, despite liberated beings don't need anything, they shouldn't confuse people with their non-doing. So they anyway do actions and people repeat after them following their example. and they should not speak about complete non-doing, otherwise the world will be destroyed. There is a Vedic story when once again gods fought against demons. They fought for death. Though everyone is immortal, and some of them understood that. And curiously enough, demons began to score off. And gods came to Vishnu, to the Lord Vishnu, and said, "Help, please." And he was like in non-doing and said, "Well, fight." And they say, "Please, we're losing." And he, "Okay, I'll help you a little bit." And he transformed into demon's spiritual teacher. Because demons also have spiritual teachers. Actually, demon's real spiritual teacher was in retreat at that moment. He had gone to tapasya, retreat, ascesis, and was not with demons. He had given them instructions and went to a retreat saying, "Do this and you'll be winning." And they were winning. But Vishnu transformed into the demon's teacher and came to demons and said, "I've returned earlier from ascesis. I hear you are doing very well. I want to give you next homilies." And he gave them a little bit skewed dharma about non-doing, that really there is no need in action, that you just need to renunciate from everything. They said, actually we've always been inclined to that. Actually, lazy people are always attracted by that tradition. You don't need to do anything, yeah. Well, he says, no need in anything. They say, well, is there something that we should do? He says, you don't need to do anything, that's it. Let life go its usual way. And demons got it as they had always wanted to do that. They stopped doing anything, and Vishnu got to his own appearance back, returned to the heavens, and said to gods, "Don't worry, they'll start losing soon." And they did. Gods actually, in this story, won with the score 100-1. That is why you should understand various traditions. In Advaita there are many various traditions. You should be an expert in all of them. Vishnu was also sort of well-disposed. He gave a dharma, having just a little bit changed it. Actually, all demons reached liberation. Just their number started to decline in the world. They began to disappear. They transmuted from the manifested world into the yet unmanifested, that's all. The number of gods started to increase and people's life began to get better. Lives of all living beings got better. If you are on the side of gods and if you are in non-doing, false non-doing, then vice versa, gods will start to disappear, good beings will disappear and the number of demons will start to grow. You'll say, well, what demons and gods, what is he talking about? Everything is God. Then look at Africa, at the children that were born with diseases. Would you really say to their faces, everything is fine, don't worry. A child is crying. Don't worry, all's fine. Wouldn't you like to have power in order to bear them from suffering? And those beings are also you, from the Advaitic point of view. It's your part. If you renounce from them, then you just don't understand your completeness. In the object of this, of that sense, liking and disliking are set in ambush. Fall not into their power, for they are the besetters of the soul in its path. So, really, he says that this fight is not a fight with swords. He says, you are upset because you are attached to all these beings, you don't understand their true nature, they are immortal. These are your feelings, don't let your attachments overcome you. And when you speak with your relatives about dharma, don't let them cloud your mind. So you should love them and teach them true dharma, true teaching. Not violently, of course, but not like this. Well, maybe they're right, they're relatives, I probably can't say anything to them, I give up. When you look at yourself and say, what? This body, it should be immortal. Am I to be Siddha? No, I can't. Really, that's a pity on yourself, indulging yourself, poorness of spirit. We must go along this way. Better is one's own law of works, svadharma, though in itself faulty than an alien law well wrought out. Death in one's own law of being is better, perilous is it to follow an alien law. Actually, when Sri Krishna read that mantra, it was a protective mantra, because it's what these beings, in whatever form, might say in your face. What? Are you a yogi? Yogi, look at yourself. 2 ears, 2 eyes, a nose. What yogi are you? Just a girl of average beauty, a boy who didn't even finish his university properly. What a yogi. And Krishna says that really your own duty carried out not perfectly is better than someone else's carried out well. And you can choose which is your true duty, to be a yogi or to be a husband, also a bad one, or to be a wife, to be a yogi or to be a TV presenter, or to be a street cleaner, a poet, an artist. You may say, an artist is already high. They are nonetheless a bit different things, a little bit different. Try to understand that. It's better to do your own duty than someone else's. Perceive your true destiny. Try to experience it in your heart now, that you are really going to do it regardless of other people's attitude towards you. Similar guidance was given to Moses on a mountain, which since then is called the Moses Mountain. He was stammering and inarticulate. He said, I must preach, my Lord, on your behalf. And he says, of course, go and preach. And how he was carrying out his duty was far from perfect, because he wasn't able to speak properly. But that duty is better than not to do your own duty. Supreme, they say, beyond the objects are the senses. Supreme over the senses, the mind. Supreme over the mind, the intelligent will. That which is supreme over the intelligent will is he, the Purusha, thus awakening by the understandings to the highest, which is beyond even the discerning mind, putting force on the self by the self to make it firm and still. Slay thou, almighty armed, this enemy in the form of desire, who is so hard to assail. Really, you should know well the antahkarana, the inner structure of your body. So, if you want to become professional yogis, you have to understand how your subtle body is formed. To be able to distinguish pranas, pick out manas, chitta, emotional being, low mind, buddhi, the high mind, you must find the ruler of your being, Purusha. All that you must be able to distinguish in yourself. I've already invited you to our center. If you want to practice seriously, please come. Because there we give such knowledge, in the center of Sri Aurobindo. I'd say that it's a rather professional approach. I can give you an example of manifoldness of your bodies now. For example, mind, manamaya kosha and pranamaya kosha. They may not be friends with each other. And also Annamaya Kosha, the physical body, also may get on well with neither mind, nor prana, nor pranamaya kosha. Literally, kosha is translated as kava, like skin. Kosha is also quite consonant with the Russian word koja, skin. So, for instance, you are a married man, and suddenly you liked some girl. And the pranamaya kosha, the cover of desires, it even stretches. Oh, and the mind says, no, I mustn't do that. I mustn't do that. So they argue with one another. And then your friends invite you to a disco, and you say, actually, I decided to read the Gospels and Bhagavad Gita. And maybe after all to a disco, maybe that's more familiar day than the night which I'm not aware of, which is set the sheer day. These are the mind and the body of desires. So, the mind wants to read Holy Scriptures, the desires want to go somewhere, and what do you think the body wants? I'd sleep a bit, because it's the third night that I'm not getting enough sleep. And the friends say, "So, are you coming?" "No, I'm not going anywhere." So firstly you decided to reject the disco, then you kind of took the book and later closed the book and went to bed. It's your third body, Annamaya Kosha, a physical color or nutritive body. It took over and persuaded all other bodies. But there are more subtle gradations that actually you have to know. Surely it's not the subject of a 2-hour lecture, because at our center, when we were comprehensively studying Gita, it took us 2 years. We looked at the Sanskrit, and it was a more serious study. Then I was asked to give a satsang, which went for 4 days, both in the morning and in the evening. A 4-day satsang. Now I have to tell you about Bhagavad Gita in 2 hours. That's why it should be clear that this is a rather abridged version, only some fundamental things, but not complete anyway. But you should study that and very seriously study yourself. Even a simple psychology has considerably advanced at studying of what you really are. Whensoever there is the fading of the dharma and the uprising of unrighteousness, then I lose myself forth into birth. Here, the extracts from the Gita are given not in the right order, just for your information. I wanted to include this shloka that says, "Don't worry, the knowledge is lost now, but every time when it's lost, I come." In a bigger or smaller form. Such examples exist in all nations. It's not the history of India, it's the history of the universe. For example, one type of renewal is Shankaracharya. It's even Buddha, though he had a religion more for atheists, as he didn't even mention the name of God. He said that God actually doesn't exist. Just there is a spiritual law, and just believe that law, it just works. In Christianity, there are such examples, for instance, Lutheranism, Luther, Protestantism, that he introduced, when Catholicism had always degraded. All that is the manifestation of the Supreme Lord, and it's not important what's his name. He has thousands of names, but it comes the truth, and it's always a renewal. You have to see that. As men approach me, so I accept them to my love. Men follow in every way my path, O son of Prithha. Really, he says that if you want to worship Christ, you can do that. Or if you worship Shiva, again, you're welcome to worship Shiva. If you worship Vishnu, yes, it's an emanation of Krishna, or the other way around. Vaishnavis of different traditions argue who's come from whom, Vishnu from Krishna or Krishna from Vishnu. But it's important that this phrase has a deeper meaning. That is, if you believe that God is so evil, He punishes, then you are welcome. You can believe that, and you'll be given the reward or punishment. If you believe that God is loving, you can see Him as loving Lord. There are worshippers of Vishnu. They love beauty, they love songs, they love love. Sorry for tautology. But sometimes people need other methods. They, for example, are more worshippers of Shiva. Shiva is manifested in the mode of tamas, the dark. It's for those who need like tapasya. In our Sangha there are different practitioners. All of them are very good, but different. Some of them used to approach me and say, "Mikhail, maybe I should go through tapas, like, so that I'd be buried, like for 3 days." I say, "And can you perhaps just meditate in your room?" Someone says, "I finally decided to go along the path of hunger. I won't eat." I say that actually I don't recommend, but if you insist. So people, when their consciousness is darkened, need very harsh actions, very, very powerful actions, yeah. There are even different healing methods according to the gunas. For example, someone gets healed with flowers, others heal themselves with urina. You can choose your own method. So the way you worship reflects the results too. And actually it's not necessarily bad, because there are very hard worlds where there aren't other types of medicine. And there you are welcome to treat with such tamasic methods of healing. But there are light worlds and methods. You have to know that it's not obligatory. I mean, one wise being about 2000 years ago said, "According to your faith will it be done to you." It's first of all, and Sri Krishna in the Gita says, "You are that what you believe in." So he almost literally repeats that, or Christ vice versa, because Krishna's story happened a bit earlier. It's a story about copyright. Good. What is action and what is inaction? As to this even the sages are perplexed and deluded. I will declare to thee that action by the knowledge of which thou shalt be released from all ills. So, I've already told you that even wise men are deluded. Even in this room there are different points of view. In reality they are all correct. You just need to unite them, see and connect what hasn't been connected in your consciousness yet. But you shouldn't stick with one extreme point of view, as you'd see only one part of God. He who in action can see in action, I can see action still continuing in cessation from works, is the man of true reason and discernment among men. He is an yoga and a many-sided universal worker. So, if you're in action, in outer action, see that action, yeah? And in non-doing you see laziness, then you are not on the right way. True and great action is to stop and experience that great stoppage of the world. And the next stage of that path is from that silence and calm to do actions nonetheless. And you'll feel that only from that state you can really act. Some yogins follow after the sacrifice, which is of the gods. Others offer the sacrifice by the sacrifice itself into the Brahman fire. Actually, you probably know those who have been to India. They pray to Kali there, to Ganesha, to a great number of gods. And even yogis, here it's said not only about ordinary people, that when they put their makeup on, they're offering a sacrifice to god Kama. And those people who go to work and say that, "Oh, I'm a free man, I don't believe in anything," but really they sacrifice to Kubera, the god of wealth. But here yogis must clearly understand what they're doing, and that they're offering sacrifices to demigods. But a true yogi is considered that who burns the sacrifice itself in the Brahman fire. So, in reality, here, by telling you, I'm also offering a sacrifice. I mean that this is also an act of knowledge, transmission, but that act is devoted also to the consciousness of Brahman and will be burnt in action. It will be devoted to the supreme knowledge, supreme truth, and the Supreme Being. Actually, all sacrifices and all actions should be offered to the highest God. In Buddhism, there is a tradition of commitment of all merits to all living beings. And that tradition is more late, not of Vedanta, and I'd like to say where it comes from. In Buddhism, generally speaking, they don't believe in God. It's just said that the world is a totality of living beings. That's why, in order that it would be easier for you, all merits are dedicated to living beings, so that it's easier for them. But it's quite a good and sincere tradition, but Krishna insists on that we nevertheless must dedicate all to the Supreme Lord. If we have a concept that we dedicate all to living beings, thereby we say, in allegorical manner, as we often do so, that, well, God, it's hard for them. No doubt you shouldn't have done this all. Well, I'm just such a good man, and now I'm gonna ease their path. And actually, you, God, are evil. But now I'll pray and do a little bit better for every single being. At least I'll do better. If we believe in God, the Supreme Lord, I repeat again, In Advaita it's one in two. It's both our true heart and that supreme and more manifested self, which at the same time both inside this universe and outside the universe. I've already said that just silence in mind is not a salvation. You have to understand that you're controlling neither sun, nor the earth, nor the gravitation. It's all illusion, illusion of the ego. And the avatars that came, they showed super abilities. So we need to listen carefully to them according to their level of transmission. Jesus was walking on the water, Krishna was holding the Govardhana hill on his little finger. And he also could stop the sun, because in Mahabharata he stopped the sun. He made it move in a different direction, thus showing that he can influence that. And we must understand that it's the most subtle feeling of the reality. On one hand, it's all a projection of ourselves. On the other hand, in the relative reality, it's not quite so. We'll talk about it. Some offer hearing and the other senses into the fires of control. Others offer sound and the other objects of the sense into the fires of sense. A yogi burns in that light all he hears and all he senses. Thus he exposes all that to the light of Brahman. Other people, in contrast, more and more go along the way of wastefulness, which is, I want to enjoy more and more. It's a little bit wrong method of action. And now we'll read about 4 types of sacrifices that can help you in the practice. The offering of the striver after perfection may be material and physical, dravya yajna, like that consecrated in worship by the devotee to his deity. Or it may be the austerity of his self-discipline and energy of his soul directed to some high aim, tapo yajna. Or it may be some form of yoga, like the pranayama of the Raja Yogins and Hatha Yogins, or any other yoga yajna. Or it may be the offering of the reading and knowledge, jnana yajna. And the next shloka, please. The sacrifice of knowledge, or parantapa, is greater than any material sacrifice. Knowledge is that in which all this action culminates, or patha. So 4 types of sacrifices, of which a yogi must know. They're all right sacrifices. The first one is dravya yajna, the material type of sacrifice. Try to remember, because it helps. It's also consonant with the Russian word for logs. It's like logs are burnt in a stove, dravya yajna. It's a material sacrifice committed when you are on the first stage of yoga. And actually you can do it on any other stage. For example, you can offer flowers or some sort of financial tribute. You can build something, a temple. It all will be dravya yajna. You're not practicing some kind of meditation, serious studies, or just offer material sacrifices. The next type of tapo yajna is restraining senses. When you say, all right, I need to fast a little bit, I need to restrain my speech. I'll tell you about that in more detail, how it works. Indian yogis stand on one leg, some of them. Others don't eat for long. Some do kumhaka, a breath holding, also a tapas. Next type, yoga yajna. It's when you practice yoga all the time. That is, you breathe, do asanas, meditate. All these are types of yoga yajna. You do those actions for the sake of God. It's very important. Well, usually I try to combine various traditions. In Christianity, Serafim Sarovsky says about that. Only actions devoted to God lead to accumulation of Holy Spirit. All the rest, if you do Hatha Yoga in order to look pretty, you are worshipping demigods, which is not exactly right. Yeah, you'll be maybe look good for some time, but it's a destructible form. Yoga should be done in the same manner as a sacrifice to God. And the last one is jnana yajna, a sacrifice of knowledge. When you are starting from the level of sutras, the understanding, up to savikalpa samadhi, nirvikalpa samadhi, sahaja samadhi. you experience these states. Sri Krishna says that a sacrifice of knowledge is more valuable to me than any other material sacrifice, which is when you become one with me. And the yogi may do different levels of sacrifices. You say, well, I'm on a high level, I'll be meditating, and you're not succeeding. Then try to go one level lower. Do a bit of yoga, breathing, training in asanas, energetic practices, mantra yoga. You say, actually, even in that I'm not succeeding much. Then go further down, fast for a while, if yoga isn't going well. But don't break your body's harmony, because body is God's temple, and it shouldn't be strained too much. You should do it so that the body won't be injured, and if even that is not going well, then you can do Dravya Yajna. But do all that in the right spirit. All four yajnas, material, control of senses, yogic sadhana and jnana, only one of them will be an abridged version, really. There is one more knowledge about the types of sacrifices, offering in the three gunas. There is a guna of rajas, sattva and tamas. Sattva is light, when you act with joy. It's when you do something with joy. Maybe you'll recall yourself or your acquaintances, so the spiritual vision will grow in you. It's when you do it with joy. You say, oh, I want to offer that sacrifice. And you do that, not wishing anything in return. Just do it. Rajas, it's a sacrifice in the following manner. When you desire something, you think, I'll do a sacrifice to that guru, but what will I get in return? You want something and you exchange it like a merchant. And tamaguna, it's, perhaps you've seen such people when they give something with hatred, like, take that. You want this, so take it. And it's just as if a person pushes himself to hell. It would have been better not to do it at all. Therefore, when you offer sacrifice any of the yajnas, you can do it in these three gunas, three rasas. A woman I know told me about one greedy woman. She came to her birthday and gave a gift in the gunas of rajas and tamas. She came to the birthday. It's amazing, such greediness is a rare thing actually. So she brought her present, and my acquaintance saw that she was literally tearing it out of her heart, and said to her, look, it's quite a good thing, maybe you need it yourself, perhaps you'll just keep it. And the woman said, really? I can keep it? Can you imagine, on a birthday? Yeah, really. That's why you try to get rid of such greediness. Give yourself not wanting anything in return. That's the right yajna, and remember about those four grades. Learn that by worshipping the feet of the teacher, by questioning and by service. The men of knowledge who have seen the true principles of things will instruct thee in knowledge. Actually, this is a very serious topic of Guru Yoga, by worshipping the feet of the teacher. Really, Indians, they pay homage to anyone who comes the first. I mean, it's heroism for them not to make a bow. But really, it's not about making a bow to everyone who has a garland. Look first who is before you. Europeans don't pay homage to anyone as a matter of principle, even if it's a very good being. And who's that after all? I'm myself special. And it's a heroism for a European, an act of power, to make a bow, to downgrade his ego. And for an Indian, it's heroism not to make a bow. An Indian thereby will gain viveka, recognition, and a European will burn his ego. And sometimes, when my disciples come to a certain stage of development, when they gain a little bit of power and knowledge, I ask them. There are different people, some took refuge long ago, some recently, and others haven't taken it yet. And I ask, can you make me a bow and do a prostration? Now I'm going to ask you a question and you, in your mind, answer it. Could you do a prostration to me? Have you answered? Usually I ask the same question to the disciples, and they answer out loud, and then I give them my own answer to this koan. Actually, I can do a prostration to each of you. So, it's a knowledge that another being is a deity. Our ego says, and why must I make a bow to him? Many Orthodox saints used to lay in prostration when saw someone. They just lay down and kept mauna, silence. If someone said, no, I can't, I used to say, that's actually the distinction, because I can do a prostration to you. Learn to diminish your ego. So now you know the answer to that question, and it won't be interesting to solve that anymore. Even if thou art the greatest doer of sin beyond all sinners, thou shalt cross over all the crookedness of evil in the ship of knowledge. It's Krishna's another oath, that whatever you may be, because demons usually say, you are such a sinful man that you shouldn't even practice yoga, you won't succeed anyway. And Krishna says, even if you are the greatest sinner, practicing jnana yoga, you can cross over the sea of suffering. That's his oath. And the question whether you believe this holy scripture or not determines your karma. Be brave in this journey. As a fire kindle turns to ashes its fuel, O Arjuna, so the fire of knowledge turns all works to ashes. There is nothing in the world equal in purity to knowledge. The man who is perfected by yoga finds it of himself in the self by the course of time. Therefore, arise, O Bharata, and resort constantly to yoga, having cut away with the sword of knowledge this perplexity born of ignorance. So, from that external battle, he still and all directs Arjuna to an inner battle. We don't have much time for the satsang, so I'd like to know, maybe some of you have questions. Do we need additional time for questions? Or we can read more shlokas or less? If some of you have questions and would like to ask them, please raise your hands. Are there such people? Higher, don't be shy. Okay, there are some people, so we'll keep some time for questions. There is a microphone, so we'll have 5-7 minutes for questions. The Blessed Lord said, renunciation and yoga works both bring about the soul's salvation, but of the two, the yoga works is distinguished above the renunciation of works. So, we have the same question again. What's better, yoga works or complete renunciation? Besides, I'll tell you again about complete renunciation. Such a motive has already been stated in this room, that we don't need to do anything, no pranayama, nothing at all. There are even sannyasins here, different direction of sannyasa. There are sannyasins that don't want to do anything at all, at least in India I know such a type exists. They say, pranayama, what for? Karma yoga, what for? We don't need to do absolutely anything. That's correct. Krishna says, yes, such type of sannyas exists, and they also reach the goal. But I value the yoga works higher, because it's a method of getting siddhis, super abilities. It leads to complete manifestation of God. He should be known as always a sannyasin who neither dislikes nor desires. For free from the dualities, he is released easily and happily from the bondage. But renunciation, or mighty armed, is difficult to attain without yoga. The sage who has yoga attains soon to the Brahman. Well, here Sri Krishna laughs a little bit. He calls Arjuna mighty armed. Really, Arjuna was such a bodybuilder. If you've seen competitions about bodybuilders, actually, he was a mighty warrior. But Krishna laughs a bit and says, it's very hard to reach renunciation, mighty armed. Your muscle power is not going to help, unfortunately. It would be the same if we'd ask now Arnold Schwarzenegger to tell about yoga. He's like, yeah, what do we need to do? And so on. So it doesn't help, it's inner efforts. And yoga, the practice of yoga, breathing exercises, asanas, meditation, they all help to enter that renunciation. So you develop and can check yourself. Children speak of Sankhya and yoga apart from each other, not the wise. If a man applies himself integrally to one, he gets the fruit of both. Here again, elimination of these disagreements, so that we won't have them here either, at the Congress. Nonetheless, they get united, I mean, in the core, they have God. The all-pervading impersonal accepts neither the sin nor the virtue of any. Knowledge is enveloped by ignorance. Thereby creatures are bewildered. Sages see with an equal eye the learned and cultured Brahmin, the cow, the elephant, the dog, the outcast. He who has the inner happiness and the inner ease and repose and the inner light, that yogin becomes the Brahman and reaches self-extinction in the Brahman, Brahmanivanam. Well, he says that creatures are bewildered. Really, the higher self, whether you do yoga, offer those sacrifices, commit good or bad actions, it's in reality above all merits and sins, Sukriti. And that's a relative understanding of virtues and of all you do. So you should experience that above action, even if you go along the way of yoga, even if you go along the way of action. Having put outside of himself all outward touches and concentrated the vision between the eyebrows and made equal the prana and the apana moving within the nostrils, having controlled the senses, the mind and the understanding, the sage devoted to liberation, from whom desire and wrath and fear have passed away, is ever free. When a man has known me as the enjoyer of sacrifice of all the worlds, the friend of all creatures, he comes by the peace. Made equal the prana and the apana. Well, you can think a lot about yourself and about how advanced you are in yoga, but actually Sri Krishna gives such criteria of achievement. If your yoga is good enough, then in meditation your breath starts to stop. If someone has experienced when the prana and the apana, inhale and exhale, are equal, and your mind firstly begins to worry, what's that? The body doesn't breathe anymore. But don't you worry, it's absolutely all right. It's sahaja kumbhaka, a natural cessation of breath, and it's all right. I mean, not when you stop it with kumbhaka, like, I'm gonna do it until I explode, until I die. He inflates. And when it comes naturally, let it last, say, for 30 seconds, but the body doesn't want to breathe. A minute, 2, 3, 5, 10, and so on. It's more valuable than any other kumbhaka or any other stoppage of breath, because it's the great peace, the great zero, when all the karma gets burnt. The blessed Lord said, whoever does the work to be done without resort to its fruits, he is the sannyasin and the yogin. Not the man who lights not the sacrificial fire and does not the works. And the next one. By the self thou shouldst deliver the self. Thou shouldst not depress and cast down the self. For the self is the friend of the self, and the self is the enemy. So, we are friends and enemies to ourselves, depending on what discipline and with what intention we do. Generally speaking, yoga is a way of accelerated evolution. So imagine that you were walking along the street and bumped into a tree, touched it with your shoulder. Well, all's well, no injury, you just dust down. And now imagine that you were cycling a bike and hit the same tree. And what if a train was going and there was a tree on the railway? In the train there may be no one left alive, or half of the people got serious injuries. You start to accelerate and you should choose the right point for that acceleration. I mean, where are you going to shoot your arrow of yoga? Thus, always putting himself in yoga by control of his mind, the yogin attains to the supreme peace of nirvana, which has its foundation in me. Krishna, he says, attains to the supreme peace of nirvana, which has its foundation in me. That's why, if you're going to speak with Vaishnavis, please don't make distinction between nirvana and Krishna's world. I mean, there are some differences and the hierarchy. Deities in immortal form that don't get destroyed in pralaya. But Krishna also speaks about nirvana, which has its foundation in him, that formless state above form and time. Actually, we've invited people from Vaishnava tradition to the satsang. They said, no, you're going to render it differently. We're not going to come with our sangha and so on. To my mind, we should not divide, but vice versa. We should unite. God is one. How can there be many traditions? Verily, this yoga is not for him who eats too much or sleeps too much, even as it is not for him who gives up sleep or food. O Arjuna. Actually, Krishna hereby gives a more detailed guidance and eliminates all deviations. I'll tell you one more funny story about people who eat little, who eat much, sleep, etc. Recently, I was asked to help one sadhika. Her parents invited me. And guess what she did with food? Now it's very popular to have separate nutrition by Ayurveda, vegetarian. Well, the vegetarian one is at least something, so that we'll not eat animals at least. Though eating flowers and plants, vegetables, is also awful, isn't it? But that's a question of how people perceive this world. But what's interesting is that this woman had been practicing long, and she had a list of products, and according to her karmic vision, she found all negative qualities in each product. Yeah, she said, oh, you can't eat tomatoes, and listed some terrible facts about tomatoes. And then I said, maybe potatoes? No. What about bread? No. I mean, why they invited me? Just to help because she couldn't walk anymore. That's actually terrible. She says, what should I do? I say, make a list of positive qualities of those products, thus try to equal your world. That's why if you're trying to reach something by just some kind of restraining, through food in this case, then you'll not reach that. It's not a sufficient qualification. From the vegetarian point of view, guess who is the best vegetarian? A rabbit, yeah. And what? It should have been reaching nirvana quickly, because it just eats only vegetarian food. I'm a vegetarian myself, but try not to be eager on that. First of all, the sacrifice of knowledge, the highest sacrifice, that's important. Well, there is a lot we can talk about. Probably we'll finish on the 16th chapter. It's in the end. And it's about division into divine worlds, demonic worlds, so we can understand how it's all seen. There are many different nuances. There are two creations of beings in this material world, the Devic and the Asuric. The Devic hath been described at length. Hear from me, O Patra, the Asuric. The world is without God, they say, not true, not founded in truth, brought about by a mutual union with desire for its sole cause, a world of chance. Really, a detail. I told you that Vishnu, when he came to demons, he just a little bit twisted the dharma. just a little bit. You know that Mercedes and the Russian car called Zaporozhets are different only in details. But everyone wants to drive Mercedes, not Zaporozhets. Though they both have 4 wheels, 1 steering wheel, and so on. You have to understand that here, at the Congress, people talk a lot about unreality of the world. I would say this: you should understand that it's relatively real. That's the detail. No doubt that for the divine consciousness, it's only relatively real. And this stage can be transformed into a cow, an oak tree, whatever. But you know that, like in the past, people like to shorten the knowledge. Yeah, for instance, relative reality. It's easy to say just unreal, an important term, that it doesn't have a basis. So, the demonic vision differs from the Devic vision. Gods see that everything is the Supreme Lord's body. And it's not like God doesn't even exist. The world is created by God's consciousness, so it's not necessarily something material. It's created with God's consciousness, and it's filled with it. That's very important, because if you strive for unreality, that the world doesn't have its aim, and you should just leave it, then you just begin to disappear. The world is created for bliss. It's a space of God's game. In the Gita, Sri Krishna also tells about 3 Purushas. There is Kshara and Akshara, movable and unmovable. Movable is a female aspect, manifestation. Unmovable, they always try to push you into Akshara, unmovable's aspect. It's your true Purusha, your true self. But Krishna says there is a third one, Purushottama, beyond all darkness, the one that projects all this space, the one from whose heart we all originate. We should not forget about the Supreme Lord. All global religions speak about that, with one detail, that they forget about the Advaitic point of view, that we're all one with Him. For that reason, there is a temporal overbalance on the side of those not very good powers. But I hope that after this lecture, the overbalance will gradually switch to our side. So now, with the Advaita Congress, we'll push out the ignorance a little bit. This battle is taking place in our consciousness, and you have to realize that. In reality, there is only light in this world. The kingdom by right is ours. We'll finish with a few shlokas. Please read till the end. He who, having cast aside the rules of the Shastra, followeth the promptings of desire, attaineth not to perfection, nor happiness, nor the high soul status. Abandon all dharmas and take refuge in me alone. I will deliver thee from all sin and evil. Do not grieve, Arjuna said. Destroyed is my delusion. I have regained memory through thy grace, O infallible one. I am firm, dispelled are my doubts. I will act according to thy word. So, we should listen to Shastras. I ask you to read holy scriptures, reread them, to read scriptures of different religions and understand them. And we've spoken with different yogis, different sadhus. Some of them say, but there are different concepts, it may be this way or that way. You should be able to distinguish and understand them all. Beyond every question, every closed door, there is a space of God and His infinities. Ask yourself questions and answer them. And Krishna at the end gives this oath that you can leave all dharmas, all your responsibilities of a husband, wife, work, and so on, and just come to your initial. Krishna is just a name consciousness, to your initial consciousness. You're not conditioned by anything. Take the way of God. I am inviting you once again to our center. Thank you. Now I'm going to answer your questions. Thank you for your diligence, for being here 2 hours, for listening and trying to understand. I love you all very much. Beginning from the 19th September, we start our course on yogic sadhana. We'll tell in detail about all your subtle bodies. There will be energetic practices, practices of Nidra Yoga, the yoga of conscious dreaming. This year we start reading the Gospels, so I invite you all to them, and also to the course of Zen Buddhism. I believe it will be interesting. If someone wants, he can take business cards at the exit of this room, where you'll see big murtis of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and our center. There you can sign for our course. Good. Also, our course is free of charge, and all willing to come can come. The only necessary form of payment is your diligence. Your diligence is obligatory. If anyone would like to make contributions, it's also welcome. What's it called? Dravya Yajna. Good. Questions? Come to the microphone, please. We have 5 more minutes. Yeah, please. If you could, please be quicker, so that we won't delay anyone. Mikhail, can I ask? Yeah, sure, and could you speak louder, please? Mikhail, I have this question. Please even louder, so everyone can hear you. The question is, you're told that any action is a sacrifice, right? Yes. And should be devoted to God? Yes. It's difficult for me to understand it completely, because there may be different impacts. One wants to steal, another one wants the other way round, to find the one who stole. What action exactly we should devote? Both? This is a good question. You know, there are people who go to work. Actually, we say that we devote everything to yoga. For example, there are people who go to work at our center too. And I say to them, so, you go to work? You say, I go to work in order to be independent and practice yoga. Actually, Shiva has his retinue, and they are demons. So, according to their nature, they have to tempt someone, take powers from another one, and so on. And you know what they're doing? They say, we have this sort of nature, but we worship God. We test all living beings, if they're worthy of God. So, demons also have their own tradition, even bad actions. Wise demons, not all of them, beginning from the level of Asuras and Rakshasas. Some of them already know this truth, because they have their own teachers, and even bad actions they devote to God. But I'm not calling you to this religion, because according to the demon's religion, God collects his sacrifices and becomes stronger with that he feeds off. According to the religion of gods, it's vice versa. He emanates light and casts it to everyone. That's why you can make a sacrifice of weakness, or you can make a sacrifice of power. You say, I can't do that, Lord, but all I do, I devote to you. There are people who declare themselves great prophets or something else. They may say, give me a sacrifice, your flat, life. Let's all burn ourselves in this room. I think that's also a wrong type of sacrifice. So Krishna says, if you give me a flower, I'll be very happy. Just if you give me a cup of water, I'll be happy. It's your heart movements. I mean, if someone wants huge sacrifices to himself, back-breaking ones, then, well, he should be manifesting himself somehow as a flying man. Because Jesus, for example, he said, leave everything and follow me. Yeah, but at the same time, he could walk on the water. So this is why we just should understand the level of sacrifice. Thank you. And a second question. If I do commit some action in favor of God, I, as a mortal being, need to realize that God needs that. I think that understanding would come if I, say, practiced yoga or was in retreat for years. This realization would catch me and would give me understanding of what I need to do, and so on. And in this world, doing what I do, I don't have time. How should I sacrifice my actions to God if I don't understand if He needs that or not? As God is almighty and takes all. You say that, I want to have some karmic link with you. I want to worship you, so I give you all. I don't know whether you need it or not. First level, when you don't know right or wrong. Second level, he says, Jnana Yajna, sacrifice of knowledge. You should be an expert, start to understand, otherwise you'll not progress. Yoga is anyway some kind of action. You should learn to sort it out. So, and knowledge, last question. Sacrifice of knowledge. What does it mean? I don't understand. Sacrifice of knowledge, it's when you want to know. It's also a form of action. What are you like? You want to know. So the very fact that you want to know and you learn, you want to know about God. This is the most valuable thing. So God is also like, oh, someone looked at me, someone wants to know, and I look at you. I got it, thank you. But, unfortunately, or fortunately, the latter is better, our meeting is coming to its end. If I didn't answer someone's questions, I'm going upstairs now, where our murtis are. There we can continue to talk for a while. And once again, thank you very much for your Jnana Yajna. I love you all very much. Thank God.